Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host amazing guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and MarTech. I'm Jeremy Goldman, Senior Director of Client Briefings at eMarketer, and today we will be hearing findings from Smartly's new survey of 9,500 plus consumers across 6 countries to discover what kind of creative content really connects with people. I'm joined now by my special guest from Smartly, Sarah Hiraki, Head of Creative, EMEA and APAC. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And we are really excited about this. Sarah has a great presentation for you. And afterwards, we will be opening it up for questions about what you've all learned. So just use the chat window to submit questions for the Q&A and to communicate with your peers in the session as well. So with that, Sarah, I'll kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining this webinar. I'm super excited to be here with you today. Today, we're talking about the state of digital creative and asking the question, what consumers really want from ads? A whole team at Smartly did a ton of work for this really interesting study. We were looking to better understand a consumer first view of creative and advertising. We know that our audiences are increasingly savvy to advertising. They know when they're being marketed to. And so there's never been a better time to ask them directly. We also know that our industry tends to be kind of inwardly focused. So in this study, we really wanted to just ask audiences straight up, what do you want to see from ads? And so we asked this about different funnel phases, and we asked about different qualities of advertising itself. If you're interested in reading the full report, you can check out this URL that's on the slide now, and I'm sure we'll share more about it afterward as well. So let's talk about the details of the methodology. We surveyed 6 countries across age groups, and we were really looking to understand how those cultural differences and generational factors and digital media consumption habits influenced people's preferences about what they wanted to see from ads. So we asked things like, what makes ads interesting? What makes you want to learn more about a brand or a product? What makes you want to buy something from an ad? Plus, we asked a bunch of questions around general preferences around the various qualities of ads, which we'll, of course, get into later. So I'm going to go into some overall findings and then some of my own takeaways as a creative person and the things that I found most interesting about the study itself. Overall findings, let's get into it. So as it turns out, audiences have a lot more in common than one might totally assume. Across the board, audiences really just want to see authentic and unique ads, and this spans across different age groups and different locales. It's great because creative is still the most important lever in gaining audience attention, cultivating brand love, and really unlocking performance. We know at Smartly that creative is our greatest performance lever. And so this survey really helped to kind of reinforce that, not just from a marketer's perspective or a brand's perspective, but from our audiences themselves. You can see in this ranked list that the look and the uniqueness and the authenticity of ads ranks really highly, but that doesn't mean you should ignore things like accessibility and personalization. It just means that great creative should be the first thing you shoot for. It should be table stakes. And the rest of these factors we can use to unlock performance for audiences in different situations. It's a nice reminder that even as we're striving for things like hyper relevance and discounts and lots of accurate targeting and lots of media focused types of levers, that creative, great creative, emotional creative that tells a story is still number one. So let's look at the different funnel stages. We want to talk about which triggers and levers we can pull throughout the funnel. Throughout the funnel, we can optimize for performance by changing 3 main factors: presentation, price, and product. And these are all going to have a slightly different impact on audiences throughout the funnel. You can see that these shift slightly, and it kind of takes us to the true basics of marketing. So if you can think way back to some of maybe your marketing degree or your first job, even savvy audiences want to see stories unfolded and see information unfolded to them in a logical way. When it comes to building out creative and campaigns, it's all about kind of just dialing these up and down according to your audience's needs. One thing I will say about this chart is that we didn't ask audiences specifically about the marketing funnel. We did ask them what they like and what they liked at different stages of the funnel in kind of their own terms. Not all consumer journeys are going to follow a regimented funnel. So it's really important to make sure you meet audiences where they are and how they're engaging with your brand. For those who are maybe familiar with the concept of the messy middle, it's not about a sequence or driving someone down a funnel specifically. It's about building that relationship with them over time and driving them toward brand love, brand advocacy, and ultimately purchasing and becoming a return customer. So this is the funnel at large with all the stages with it. You can see that presentation and product, storytelling and actors, really, really powerful. But as we look through the funnel stages, it changes just slightly. So let's get into those. In the upper funnel, presentation really matters. You can think of this as your front door, your first impression, curb appeal. In environments where audiences can quickly skip or scroll past your ad, it's more important than ever to earn their attention with entertainment-led content. So instead of having to sit through television commercials, now we have a choice. And so that kind of aspect of the entertaining factor, we see that storytelling and actors is second place for most important in this area. That's really what's going to have people engage with your ads, pay attention, remember what they're being told, and ultimately create a positive association with your brands. What I really love about this is that challenger channels like TikTok are really bringing back an old school love of storytelling. I think it's really fun. The 30-second TV spot, we'll see later in the report, has not died. People really love that. And they love the entertaining part of it. So not necessarily the format, but they love skits and comedy and actors and endorsements. And these are all really powerful things that people want when it comes to audience interest. The mid-funnel question we asked was, what makes you want to learn about a brand? And it's slightly different from that upper funnel. While presentation is still really, really important, the most important factor for audiences in this stage is product. So product matters slightly more than presentation and storytelling when you're encouraging your audience to learn about a product, and that is to build that consideration layer. And then finally, in the lower funnel, it's all about expressing value. So you can kind of think of that as price times product. And these are the two things that stick out the most in this part of the research. When we're asking audiences, what makes you want to buy a product from an ad? They want to see that the product is something that they want, and they want to know that they're getting the best price or promotion at the time for their money. So be compelling, be informative, be clear about what they'll get and what they'll pay, and build on that brand trust you've already established upstream. So overall, we can see that audiences are uncompromising. It's interesting to me that it's kind of a classic depiction of the funnel. We know that we want to tell a story, then we want to inform about a product, and then we want to seal the deal with great value. But audiences are savvy to this, right? They don't want to just see advertisers race to the bottom. They don't just want lowest prices. They don't just want a recommended product. They want to see something that is entertaining and informative and offers them real value, which can kind of be bad news if you're working the old-fashioned way, right? That's a lot of ads to make. That's a lot of copy lines to write. It's a lot of images to shoot. And we know that digital channels are really hungry for assets. So while this research is not necessarily controversial, it poses a really big challenge in terms of digital advertising. We know that creative fatigues really, really quickly in digital channels, and we have an enormous amount of creative to produce. And so if you are going to attempt to do this one by one, you need an army of talent, which unfortunately isn't feasible for most brands. And so we have to find creative ways to work around this. The way that we do this at Smartly is through focusing on building out creative frameworks, right? So a structure that can tell a story at scale. So how can I lay the groundwork or create an architecture that will allow for me to substitute copy lines and images and characters and storylines so that I can hit this level of velocity that's really required by channels like Meta and TikTok and Google. We want to build out flexible design concepts that we can pick up and run with without needing to start from scratch every time. And that's really at the heart of the challenge of the modern marketer. So moving on, what should we take from this study? I found that there were kind of four things that really stuck out to me and that I think I'll be talking to clients about throughout the second half of the year, and that really resonated with me from an actionable perspective. There are a lot of great insights in the report. Again, I really encourage you to download it and have a read, but I'll focus on four things that I think you should definitely hold close to guide the second half of your year. The first is that in the upper funnel, you need to tell a great story. Channel your inner Don Draper for the upper funnel, bring your creative A game. I was really personally surprised that production values, more than relevance, are what audiences want to see in this space. But again, it's not necessarily an either or, it's about and. Be beautiful and relevant, be cinematic and sell me something. Audiences like advertising. They want to be entertained. They want to engage with your brand. So the creative strategies in this space are really wide open. There's a ton of exciting potential. And that also means for advertisers that we don't need to throw out our good ideas. We don't need to throw out our aspirations to shoot something or craft something or write something amazing. Audiences want uniqueness and authenticity in this space. That was one of the biggest headlines from the study. And so walking that line can be really challenging, but there are a lot of great ways to go about it. So I would focus on striking and cinematic visuals, relatable storylines and memes and anecdotes, things that encourage browsing. So we've all, I'm sure, been glued to our phones for things like unboxings or try-ons. Those things that can help people browse are really, really great. We love animation. Think ASMR style visuals and sounds that really pull us in. Bring your recognizable talent. This is the time to tap influencers and creators, show off aspirational lifestyles, and of course, be bold with sound. But this doesn't all need to look the same. These are three examples from Smartly clients that I'm really, really in love with. It can be everything from gorgeous brand films for Nike to this gorgeous kind of hangover story that we told for Just Eat Takeaway and Eggslut, or it can be a B2B execution. It doesn't necessarily need to be just about consumer marketing. Tell a story and bring your A game when it comes to creative in the upper funnel. One of my favorite examples of this is how you can balance creative that is both user generated in feel or creatively driven in feel with creators, and you can mix it with brand assets themselves. So when it comes to Ryu, this is one of our favorite examples. They were able to mix and match creator content with things that were more shot in a traditional way. And that they were able to unlock an enormous amount of both creative scale. So again, meeting the needs of these channels that are super hungry for assets, and also unlocking more views, longer watch times, and increased CTR. So even though this was upper funnel activity, it had this resonance throughout the funnel. So it really delivered on multiple fronts for them. They were able to, in one screen at one time, as you can see from these examples, deliver authenticity and high production values to really unlock performance in a really exciting way. So this was great work to the Ryu team and to the Smartly team to unlock that performance. The second point, in the mid-funnel, you're making your case. When I speak to brands about mid-funnel or consideration-driving advertising, I always challenge them to think about if you were stuck in an elevator with your audience, what would you say to them if you were stuck with them? This is the space to show off, to educate, to surprise and delight. And what our study found is that it needs to be focused on your product. One of my favorite genres of advertising is infomercials, and we're seeing a return of this in the video advertising space, especially. And that's because infomercials or infotainment is so good at encapsulating these qualities of brand value, educational, and kind of big impact product driven narratives. These are the types of tactics that audiences really want to see. So focus on the difference that your product will make in their lives, focus on showing out how it looks or trying to express how it feels and tastes or smells, and look at the results. So people want to see how-tos before and after. They want to see the materials, how it's made, the provenance of your product. They want to see interesting use cases. Maybe someone's using it in an unusual way. They love testimonials, and they'd love to see how easy it is to shop, ship, try on, and return products if they need to. So giving them that nice 360 view of what your business looks and feels like. An amazing example of this is our work with Get Your Guide. If you don't know Get Your Guide, they are amazing. They are a travel experiences company, which I have personally used many times. And so what they needed to do is communicate to their audiences kind of a preview of what you'd experience on a holiday, which is a pretty challenging task. And they needed to do so across hundreds of travel experiences in a way that was informative and authentic and beautiful and believable. And they had to cram a lot of information into this. So we worked with them to build out, again, a dynamic durable design system that could help them get that across. And so they used a mix of UGC photography and professional photography. They used pricing to show people and express to them what they would get. And of course, they wanted to bring them into that moment. So some gorgeous video clips here of the experiences themselves. And it can be as simple as that, to just bring someone into what you're trying to do and express to them the value that your product provides. And of course, for Get Your Guide, that means the emotional payoff of having an amazing experience when you're traveling. Number 3, in the lower funnel, we are trying to close the deal. So demonstrate value and bring your best offer in the lower funnel. This is the time to really go all in. Do not be afraid to sell to people. I find that it's so interesting that marketers often are a little bit afraid to go with a really tough, specific CTA, but those can be the best levers of performance. So you want to leverage the brand love and all the interest you've built up with your audience to show them value. Again, audiences don't just want the lowest price, they want good at the best possible price. So you want to express that to them, whether you're offering benefits like shipping or freebies, or you've got great reviews or guarantees of the product. All of those things come together to drive value. And so when it comes to these audiences and our respondents talking about what compels them to buy, it's quality advertising, but knowing that they're seeing deals and offers along the way that help bolster that decision. But it doesn't have to be just about a markdown, for example. You don't have to compromise the caliber of your experience. I know a lot of brands struggle with, how do we express value or an offer when we have a really prestigious or high caliber or premium brand. And I think this example from FanDuel does a really great job of that. So what they did is combine highly relevant, highly urgent messaging, so an upcoming NFL or NBA game, with an offer, risk-free betting up to $1,000. And this combination drove urgency, it drove value, and it sparked a lot of interest while still coming to audiences on Snapchat with really beautiful high-spec creative. And so giving them some value and then demonstrating value all kind of came together in a perfect way for FanDuel. They had a great success with this on Snap. They drove down CPIs by 16%. And this will continue, this live data approach to sports and offers will continue to be part of their marketing strategy moving forward. Some really exciting work. And finally, our fourth takeaway is all about showing up in your audience's favorite spaces. So you've mastered the message. It's time to talk about scale. And this is what the hard part is all about. So it's a challenge, but it's a necessity of meeting the needs of a diversifying ecosystem. We know that we have to show up in lots of different places at once. And gone are the days where digital is one homogenous channel, right? So each partner, each channel that you're advertising in wants you to tailor creatives for those platforms. And that makes sense because each platform has its own pattern of behavior. Each platform has a different audience mindset. Imagine the way that you open YouTube versus Pinterest versus TikTok. Those are different purposes. Those are different mindsets. I might go on Pinterest to explore ideas. I might look at Instagram to see updates from my friends, and I might go on TikTok to be entertained. So all of those things need to speak to the right audiences and the right mindsets when you're advertising. You wouldn't run the same out-of-home creative as you do on TV, so the same applies here. While this audience data really backs this up, there are some kind of universals, right? So Meta is still pretty universally popular, especially among millennials and older audiences, and other channels have this significant share of audience. But the trend is going toward a more diversified media mix. And so audiences that are younger, so Gen Alpha and Gen Z, those things are trending toward a more equal split across channels. And so we're continuing to see that, where if you leave out a channel, for example, if you don't advertise on TikTok or Snap and you favor the others, you may be missing out on a share of voice. There is some good news, a lot of similarities. Everyone loves TV and everyone loves TV style creative. And I think that just speaks to the power of pure entertainment channels. We love big screens, we love drama, we love entertainment, and of course that has a ripple effect through the rest of the creative ecosystem. TV was consistently the preferred format for video content, but it loses its dominance for younger generations. So again, they're diversifying more against TV than other audiences. So digital natives want to see more screens. They want to see more placements that have a diverse perspective to them. So yeah, don't miss out by leaving certain channels out of your marketing mix. It's really challenging. It's a lot of video, especially to produce, but you can do it if you've got the right plan and the right partner. A great example of this is one of our longest standing creative partnerships, and that's with Uber. We work with them across rides, eats, driver, anything Uber does, we're working with them. And they've partnered with us to really build out this ecosystem of different creative concepts they can use. So imagine it as like a creative buffet, right? You can go in and you can mix and match the different parts in order to customize, reuse, test, reuse again. And you don't have to go back to the drawing board every time. And of course, going back to the beginning, going back to the drawing board is what is super expensive, super time consuming, and can be really frustrating for creatives if you work on something and it only goes live for a short amount of time. So what we worked on with Uber is to make sure that we could use and reuse and continue to learn from all of the creative that they were building out over time, because adding on to that kind of legacy of the creative made them stronger than ever before. And of course, it made them more responsive. So when you have things that are already structures that are approved by brand and legal that are already localized, for example, you can just update the copy, update the messages, the images, and go live really quickly, which, as you can see from these examples with Uber, it comes in really handy if you face a global pandemic, but also works for responding to customer insights. So cultural moments, a new presidential candidate, a summertime pop music meme. These things can all be really powerful levers that you can pull on. So to close us out, I think that really brings us full circle. Brands need to be agile. You need to be good listeners. And that was what this research was all about, is responding to actual customers, listening to their voices, hearing out their wants and their needs in as close to real time as possible. And that's the challenge I want to issue to marketers in H2 is how can you do these things? Tell a great story, make a clear case for your product, bring your best offers, and show up in your audience's favorite spaces and keep listening to them because audiences will tell you what they want to see and hear. Brands who listen and brands who show up in the right places are the brands who are going to win. And that's what I think this report really encompasses to me. So I'd love to kind of get into some questions. I'll pass it back to Jeremy to head into our Q&A.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you for sharing these great insights. I wish I could kind of derail us by asking about seven different questions myself. But unfortunately, you were so engaging that we got a lot of really interesting things in live. So yeah, I think let's just kind of jump into it. So one of the first questions, and I think that this is probably one of those things where you can get a few hours, of a day going by in our industry without hearing the term AI. So, how can you use AI to improve creative? And then a follow-up question, how do you achieve authenticity when you're trying to use AI?
That's an amazing question. And it's a conversation that we're having every single day at Smartly, and I'm having with my teams and my clients every single day. So I'll kind of break it up into those two aspects. So we like to say at Smartly that AI gives us a better starting point, right? It's not meant to replace creative talent. It's certainly not meant to replace creative thinking or brand thinking, or even the structures in place around our marketing, but it can help us speed up the grinding tasks. And for creative folks, that might be removing backgrounds from product images. It might be generating 100 different headlines that pull in a price, automatically. It might be doing something like optimizing creative rotation. So those grinding tasks, when we can outsource them to AI or when we can use a tool that has AI built into it, saves me time so I can focus on the bigger ideas. And so that's what I really want to promote when it comes to using Gen AI and using AI tools in a responsible way as a creative person. Obviously, there's governance, there's ethics at play. You want to make sure that you've got the right partner and that you know what models you're using. But I love AI for the fact that it can free up my time. It can free up my creative team's time to start thinking about bigger ideas, tell these big narratives that people actually want to see rather than spending time on kind of grinding production design tasks. And the second question was authenticity. Is that right?
Yes.
So AI and authenticity sometimes feel at odds. But I think as long as you decide where you want your brand to land with AI tools and authenticity, you can kind of make that call for yourself. It's very much a kind of personal choice when it comes to the way a brand wants to express itself in that way. We've obviously seen things like avatars and AI generated or model generated influencers in the past. That can be a great tool for some brands. It might not be a great fit for others. And so I would say you should lean on AI to automate the things that you think that it is good at doing. So automate maybe translation so that you can reach more people. You can automate the generation of images. You can contextualize things a little bit better, but you should keep the things that you maybe hold most sacred for your creative teams and for your brand to make those decisions themselves. We always want to have AI be a contributor to the story rather than be the sole author of it. And so, yeah, I think making sure that we're employing AI in the right spaces and always keeping your audience front of mind, their experience matters the most. And really, when you do it the right way, you can use AI to make a more authentic experience by putting forward real human creative insights and using it as an engine to drive those.
That's great. I love the authenticity question because, it is really one of those universal truths of creative excellence. That's one of the things that audiences crave. And actually, another question, tied to that, there are obviously some distinctions in ad consumption and preferences across these different generations. But what are some more of those other universal truths of creative excellence that we can be thinking about for our ads in general?
Yeah, I loved that distinct advertising and authentic advertising ranked first and second for every generation. I think we often boil it down to like, oh, Gen Z cares about authenticity, but so do generations older and younger than Gen Z. I think everyone wants to believe the content that they see. I think because we're so media literate, or hopefully we're very media literate at this stage in the world, that folks are discerning about what they see. And so distinctive advertising, creative advertising, and authenticity really does matter for every generation. The same with presentation. We all want to see great design. We all like, it's a human truth that we like looking at beautiful art, that we like looking at interesting art. And so all of those tenets are really, really important. So I think it's nice that we are unified by the fact that we can all appreciate a great ad. I mean, think of the kind of universal appeal of holiday ads or Super Bowl ads. We all have something that we love or that we can chime in on there. And so that definitely remains a universal truth.
This is a question near and dear to my heart because, people are always asking us questions about differences from platform to platform from an execution standpoint. Do the value audiences place on production value vary by platform? I've seen that audiences on TikTok Reels prefer production that looks native to the platform,
Mhm.
like a self-shot, lower production value, and obviously there's a degree of truth to that, but maybe you want to talk about that for a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. So the study unearthed that while authenticity kind of reigns supreme, so definitely to that point, TikTokers want to see things that look like they belong on TikTok. And people look watching reels or watching YouTube shorts, they want to see things that feel native to those platforms. So that's still number one. However, when we surveyed audiences about do you care that it feels like a TikTok, that it feels like an Instagram post, for example, they rated that pretty low. So even younger audiences don't mind if an ad is tailored to the platform. They mostly care about presentation and authenticity.
Somebody else observed, building on what you just said, it's amazing how TV is tops across all generations, and the lead definitely narrows for Gen Alpha, but then again, hasn't that always been the case? So I guess a bit of a, question that's not a question, but maybe you want to talk a bit about that.
Yeah. I think grain of salt there a little bit. When I was kind of going through this data, I was like, wow, these are, you can see this slope. But I think we can also take into account things like life stage. Younger audiences have more time or more disposable income to spend doing certain things than older audiences. A lot of millennials and up, for example, or even Gen Z now and up are parents. So they're spending time doing different things. So I think while these are definitely true and statistically relevant findings, we should also kind of overlay what we know about humans and what we have to do in our lives and what we're interested in.
So pivoting to something else that you talked about towards the end of your presentation, we have a question about where should I start when it comes to building out a flexible design system?
Absolutely. I think put your brand at the center of the table, right? And consider your brand identity as the core. If that was you, then imagine your kind of flexible design system as your wardrobe of clothes or, the different personalities or stances you might take in everyday life. So asking yourself what's optional and non-optional in terms of your own brand voice and appearance, that will help guide your kind of core look and feel. And then once you have that kind of locked in, right? So into like modular design, as we call it, every brand will have kind of rules around headlines and lockups and logos and styles of photography. We'll lock those things into place, and then we'll start kind of asking questions. How would my brand come to life for a dog lover versus a cat lover? How would my brand come to life for Valentine's Day versus Halloween? How would my brand come to life for someone who's never heard of me versus someone who loves me so much and wants to hear more from me? And so by kind of thinking in layers and thinking in like modules, you can start to build out a system where you can swap a headline, an image, a CTA, and that's kind of, the basics of it. And in a lot of ways, that's what we would define as DCO or dynamic creative optimization. Um, but then it kind of goes deeper than that, right? So once you've mastered kind of the basics of swap a headline, tailor the message, tailor the image for your audience, you can start to go deeper. What would happen if I had custom logic that set up, different cultural moments and variations? And so when we build out the system, you want to build one structure that you love and you're happy with and feels true to you, and then look for all the ways you can substitute different parts of it. Kind of like, I don't know, endless metaphors for this really, but rearranging furniture in a room, I've heard it described as, making meal menu items at Taco Bell. By remixing the beans, cheese, rice, and things, you can kind of make lots of more things out of one.
Love that the food analogies and the mention of buffet before. It's not lunchtime in New York yet, so thanks a lot. But So in regards to influencers and creators, and I think that that's, an interesting part because, design system is all about having a degree of control over your design. But with influencers and creators, you're kind of relinquishing control a bit, right? So how significant is the value of their endorsement? If assuming that they have a lot of pull with the audience that you're trying to reach. And what's the best strategy to leverage their valuable recommendations and endorsements beyond, their native channel?
Sure. So there are a couple of different options there, right? You can give a great brief. I think everything, whether it's a creator or influencer or a creative team, everything hinges on a great brief to make sure that they have what they need to really succeed. So once you've given a great brief, you can kind of go in two different ways. You can either give them that brief and give them some guardrails so that when you go and take that content on, you can kind of compartmentalize it. That might be briefing them to give you three different hooks, three different lunchtime stories, three different CTAs, and of course you can mix and match those. Or it might be to give them more of an open-ended brief, right? So you might say, we just want you to shoot and be inspired, and then we will take that on and remix it, in which case you might end up with a video that feels maybe more like a music video or a vlog or something like that. So I encourage brands to, think about what you need the assets for. If you need to make five versus 5,000, you're going to take a different approach. And the more scale you need to unlock, I would say the more pre-production you need to do. So planning for the way the story beats will come to life. Planning on who those creators are and what you think they might deliver you, but also making sure that you're giving creators the ability to add their own quirks and fun. Ask for a lot of B-roll. Sometimes the best creator-driven ads are built on just fun and funny B-roll that your creators will give you. So really, I would say be ready to be resourceful with what creators give you, or on the flip side, be ready with an amazing brief so that you can collaborate together on the outputs.
I'm going to kind of merge these next two questions just because there's a commonality between them. Um, where do you start if you're a new brand and need to build your presence out? And then how do you test the effectiveness of the ads that are created before launch? Because I would actually just say, if curious your thoughts that it's probably important to just try different things and see what resonates with your audience, especially if you're starting. But obviously, if you're, a brand that's well on their way as well, you want to be doing that type of testing, right?
Absolutely. I would say look to best practices from various channels as guidance. I have a little anecdote on this. I'm a content creator, and I gave myself a little bit of a challenge during the pandemic when I had some free time to become a TikToker, right? I had zero followers, I had zero presence on TikTok. And the best practice guidance for organic growth on TikTok is to post 3 to 5 times a day. So, again, that enormous challenge of creative velocity. And so I did that, and I was able to unlock massive growth just by being consistent and hitting that velocity of production. So those best practices, those tenets around, hygiene of posting, making sure that you're captioning things, that your volume's okay, that you're engaging with other people's posts, those are all very much true. But I think when we talk about paid media or advertising, we often run into a problem where best practices kind of become median practice. And then it becomes about how you as a brand express yourself in the best possible way, especially in channels like TikTok and Reels and Stories. There's like an X factor to the way that brands come to life. Think about like the Duolingo owl, right? No one would have expected that a twerking giant furry owl that's not a best practice anywhere. But they've unlocked something amazing with their audience. And so start with the best practices, get into a cadence and a rhythm. One of the things about especially social media advertising is that it's hungry. Once you get on that train, you want to be able to keep going. So find a cadence that works for you. And when you do see success, double down on that success and tweak little things at a time to test. But I would say, yeah, use these durable design systems to make that job easier on yourself. Don't try to reinvent the wheel every time. Instead, create a lot of content, create content that feels good for you and feels relatable to your audience, and then kind of optimize on that using these different levers we talked about. So, presentation, product, price, all of those things.
No, that's great. And I think we've got time for one more. I like this one because obviously, it talks about a little bit the idea of what's an ad and what isn't, and how do people see things. Are there clear differences between ad fatigue on Instagram versus TikTok?
Interesting. I think if we're talking about Instagram Reels and TikTok videos, then I think there are similar patterns of human behavior around those, and so the way that folks will get used to or kind of start to ignore or scroll past an ad they've seen before, that's going to be very similar. Uh, and so fatigue there in those types of channels where it's the only thing on my screen, it's right in front of me, I've got the sound on. I'm going to scroll past it when I've seen it a few times, and I'm probably going to go past it quite quickly. And so things fatigue much faster in that space. But when it comes to kind of a diversity of channels, I would really lean into the algorithms that help moderate that. So putting caps on that and monitor your performance really. So when you start to see performance drop, it's time to refresh your creative. In Smartly, we have tools that automate that process. So they look for and predict dips in performance and then flag for you, hey, it's time to refresh your creative. Love that. Super helpful. And so, yeah, I think the way to do it is to have lots of ads at your disposal so that when you start to see performance either dip or you start to predict that dip, you can re-up with a new one. So keep the wheel spinning when it comes to creativity.
And it is tough as a reformed creative. I'll also say it's so incredibly difficult when you're tied to a piece of creative that you thought was going to resonate and you were going to be able to keep it live for a while, and then it just doesn't work. And now you're on to the next campaign, and it's heartbreaking sometimes, no?
Yeah. I think like if you really love a piece of creative, find a way to remix it or reuse it because it may have been the first 3 seconds just didn't resonate with that audience. Is there a way you can reuse your assets? Um, I think that's where we're going in a lot of ways. All the big brands I work with proudly recycle creative as long as they thought the product was good and as long as the work went into it was quality. There's always an audience for it. And so I would encourage folks if you didn't see great performance the first time, don't be afraid to try it again.
Amen. The circular economy for digital
Mhm.
assets. Sarah, Thank you again for this great content and answering all of the questions from our audience. We really appreciate it. This was great.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I had a great time. And thank you, everyone, for watching and being here with us.
And before we wrap up, let me quickly take a moment to tell you about eMarketer's media channels. Visit emarketer.com to register for upcoming live analyst and tech talk webinars and sign up for our newsletters, which are great. And don't forget to tune into Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. Keep an eye on your email for the link to today's playback. And of course, feel free to contact us if you have any other questions. Thank you all for your time. And thanks again to Sarah, the team at Smartly, and our eMarketer studio team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We will see you all on the next Tech Talk.